Safe space. Was it a good idea or not a good idea? This is a little investigation into the whole topic. So I recently was part of making a little short film about male life expectancy in my town, and uh, one of the things that came up from one of the men was about creating a safe space. And so I bristled at the idea and made that card, and we put it in the film. And part of the reason for my hesitation around it is how casually it's used without a proper investigation. So I thought I'd put a question mark on the end and make this little more in-depth idea of what's going on with it. So one of the things that people do is, often when it's made into a discussion, it's very politically charged, particularly in America. We have one side very pro-safe spaces, and the other side ridiculing the idea. And when it comes up, it's often the first thing around safety is around like a physical safe space. So for example, indoors, will the roof hold up? Will the structure of the building be okay? There won't be an earthquake, won't be a lightning strike. And often people don't mean that because that's taken for granted. There are situations, for example, in war zones and things, where physical safety, or domestic violence is another one, where physical safety is an important thing, and that's a separate category that I'm not really addressing now. And when most people talk of safe spaces, they're not really talking about that. What most people really mean is they're talking about an emotional landscape, a landscape of non-judgmental, where they're not going to be challenged on their views, they're going to be heard, they're going to be listened to. Feelings are going to be given high priority, so someone's feelings are very important in a safe space. And this seems like a good idea, and it often is, but I'm looking at what are the unintended consequences of that. What are the things that are not happening? So if you label some spaces safe and some, then what you're also doing is you're labeling outside of that not safe. So for example, people are saying, by definition, you label the majority of the world unsafe, even though it's the safest. The world is safer than it's ever been in its history in terms of violence or many other aspects. And it creates this kind of split between those two things, which I think is unhealthy, because it also gives a sense of, if you can share feelings or yourself or a deeper essence in a safe space, then you can't do that outside of it, which again, it creates this split and this boundary. So that's one thing. The other thing is, often the term is connected with sort of human rights and justice and social justice, and this is connected in with the idea of rights, as in R-I-G-H-T-S, which I see is often confused with rites, as in an older sense of the word R-I-T-E-S, or rites of passage. And so in a rites of passage, you are looking between, for example, childhood and adulthood, or death, birth, and safety in an emotional sense is not required in those situations. In fact, it prevents a lot of the rites of passage from taking place, because a sense of psychological death, at least, and often in traditional rites of passage, a physical chance of death is important for that passage to occur. And so by creating this artificial safe space, it doesn't allow that to occur, so it's an unintended consequence that it locks in a lack of change and evolution. not intended, but that's one of the aspects. The other part is that it seems that when people talk about it, it can come from, uh, in a psychological language, a wounded child place, or an inner child where in someone's childhood maybe they weren't heard, they didn't feel like they could express themselves, their feelings weren't acknowledged. Um, Generally, maybe an unhealthy environment that or they perceive it to be, and so they're trying to reclaim that and heal some part of them that um, uh, wasn't healed or perceived to be healed in their childhood, which then enthrones the inner child as the kind of instigator of the safe space, which is very dangerous in an adult world, because in an adult world you need um, you need more than just safety. All sorts of situations, for example, you need to be emotionally challenged, you need to be judged sometimes, you need to, there's power dynamics, there's all sorts of things which one can see as not safe, but they're actually good for the psyche and the development, and particularly the soul. And the inner child doesn't have a sense of the soulfulness of life. So that's another part. And so all of that is contained within the word safe space, which isn't necessarily ever, I've never heard a lot of that in any discussions. So I'm very careful about it, and I don't particularly like the use of the word. And also it is important for certain situations, like I was saying, domestic violence, people from war zones, or also like people who are connected with street violence and things like that. So, but in general, I'm not very keen on safe spaces. So look forward to hearing your comments and your thoughts. Thanks.